It's the passion that each of us has to make a difference in this vast battle against a world that's depleting its resources, and that furniture is our ally.
It's not about just bringing plants, it's about understanding how we can get closer to nature, really develop this authentic relationship with nature, respect it when we are outdoors, and then bring it more indoors and you know, being imbued in that relationship with nature.
Hi, I'm Jessica Blue, and welcome to my apartment in Lincoln Square. When my husband and I were shopping for an apartment, we really wanted to find something with vintage character. We really love all the detail and some of the molding and the archways. I love thrifting, I love repurposing furniture, and it all sort of just came together with these nods to mid-century and just like an eclectic vibe. Oh, that's FIFA. This piece is one of my favorite pieces in the dining room. I found it at Megmade, which is a great local vendor. She finds these awesome vintage pieces and then she custom paints them for you. This is something I found through Craigslist. It's a great bust. And this portrait that we're looking at is an actual portrait of my grandmother. So I had it shipped from Poland, and my grandmother's with me in the dining room every day. This corner of the home, I immediately knew I wanted to do a reading nook just because of this little bump out and the space here for shelving. You can take out an ottoman and just kick up your feet, and it just sort of makes up this really great entryway when you walk into the home. We love to host friends and have dinner parties, so I found this great burl table. I love burl. I found it at CB2, great price point. And I paired the dining table with these really great Seska chairs that I found off of Craigslist again. I just had them reupholstered with some really fun Maharam fabric. This is probably one of my proudest achievements. It's something that was very cheap to do, but I love a gallery wall. And every single painting on this wall is from a thrift store. The Canadian-based artist Isabella Di Sclafani made this beautiful Whitney Houston painting for me that I added to my gallery wall of thrifted finds. And then of course, we have our ever-growing bar that prior to quarantine wasn't this large, but my husband, who is a huge Scotch whiskey fan, has collected some cool things over time. So we'll experiment and make cocktails over the weekend and during happy hours. Welcome to my living room, which is technically a master bedroom that changed into a living room because we really wanted a full dining space. But it's worked out really great, especially with transitioning to working from home. And it's sort of a nice, cozy space that can sort of transition from working to then relaxing and sitting on the couch. A really fun project that we did in this room was due to the fact that there were already sconce locations on either side. I went ahead and updated that and I added a little detail. We found some really great leftover Maya Romanoff vinyl and sort of had it cut out to fit the size of the sconce location, and then we had it framed out. We found a really great sofa from West Elm, but I had a friend find these really great Thayer Coggin chairs from Mercantile M, which is in Andersonville. It's a shop that I frequent a lot. They were in great condition. These didn't have to get reupholstered or anything. And then this great like two-tiered coffee table was another vintage find that I found through Cherish, and this literally cost me $100. My workspace is sort of a combination of things. Like I had to bring in a task chair from my office. Also, I like to compose things in trays here, like samples for client projects. It's great with organization and just accessing things like very easily. Welcome to my bedroom. I knew that I wanted darker paint and sort of brought that in with like some of the darker bedding. Another really great piece in this room that I really love is this art piece on the wall. It is from Dial M. Another really great local Chicago shop, and for some reason I already had this pillow, and so it was meant to be this sort of like color connection. And then another great piece that's very special to me is this watercolor print. It was done by a friend that I knew when I was this old, because that's me in the picture with my nanny. And then 20 years later, we found each other on Facebook, and he told me that, you know, this was part of his art collection. I was very lucky to get reunited with, you know, a piece of my childhood that I don't remember. Working for a design firm, you sort of always get like little ends and pieces of things that customers don't want anymore. So I took this Dadar linen that's really heavyweight, gorgeous, and super expensive. I think it was meant to be a duvet or something, but I turned it into these really cool decorative panels and adds really great pattern and texture to the room. This little bathroom was a fun project because it was a complete gut. We had a radiator at one point. We ripped it out and we installed heated flooring. And then I just found some really great subway tile and a little mosaic for the floor and just alternated the grout so that it created this really cool graphic. Welcome to the kitchen. This is the place where my husband and I love to cook. The only thing we really did in the kitchen here was paint the cabinets. They were a very cheapo builder's grade, you know, wood, and just to sort of give them a little facelift, we painted them Benjamin Moore gray and added a really cool, like, colorful rug that I found on Etsy, and the space was completed.
Hi, I'm Rachel Cope. This is Calico Wallpaper. Welcome to our studio. Hi, welcome to our studio. These are the offices of Calico Wallpaper. Come on in. I'm one half of Calico Wallpaper. We're a Brooklyn-based bespoke wallpaper company that creates original handmade artworks that we then translate digitally into custom murals for the home. Nick and I started our company in 2012. Nick presented this idea to me of marbleizing paper. I ended up becoming really passionate about paper marbling. We felt kind of confident that we had something that we should run with. This is where we have our design and our sales, and then in this space over here, it's more of an open studio environment for art process, for sales meetings. What Nick and I loved about these two spaces is that they were like basically white box, very minimal, simple. We love the natural light. We love that we're out in Red Hook. It feels like a bit of a retreat. I mean, at least the most you can get in New York City. My process is a bit unorthodox, I think, for most designers, and I think that's because I have a background in sculpture. Both my parents were also artists, and my mother was a fiber artist. When I was a kid, I basically grew up in her studio, marbleizing paper, creating hand-pulped paper, sewing, dip dyeing. This collection is the first collaboration that we ever worked on. We paired up with BCXSY. They presented us with the idea to invert outer space to create these very cosmic, abstract paintings. We were able to source imagery of outer space, and then we worked with very sophisticated digital designers to create these impressions of outer space at a high enough resolution to print murals. Nick and I love working in Red Hook. Our spaces are very close together, so it's a short 5-minute walk from our design studio and sales studio to our new office and studio space. This is Nick's office right here, which you can see has some beautiful natural light. Then if you come in here, I can show you my private studio, where I have some original artworks on the wall and where I can create some of my process. Suminagashi marbling is a form of Japanese marbling where you float ink on water. It's very painterly, it's very intuitive, it's very organic. I'll basically be using 2 brushes and I'll be touching them on the water to create these concentric circles that expand. You can use your breath or different sounds to actually agitate the ink to create different patterns. Anytime that we are developing a new product, I like to create smaller scale artworks and then obviously increase them as we get more comfortable and we hone in on a specific technique that we really love. So this is a smaller experimentation where the darker hues are in the foreground and then the fine lines are more in the background. And then you can see here is a larger scale of this smaller artwork. And then here you can see how we've overlaid the kind of smoky layer with the concentric rings that almost look like tree rings. I never thought we would be where we are. It's been an incredible journey and experience that Nick and I have had. It's truly incredible, and I think it's a testament to how hard we have worked and also that we surrounded ourselves with good people. Thank you so much for joining me on a tour of our studio today. I had a great time, and I hope that you take the opportunity to check out some of our collections.
It's the passion that each of us has to make a difference in this vast battle against a world that's depleting its resources, and that furniture is our ally.
It's not about just bringing plants, it's about understanding how we can get closer to nature, really develop this authentic relationship with nature, respect it when we are outdoors, and then bring it more indoors and you know, being imbued in that relationship with nature.
Welcome to our Ultimate Kitchen Takeover. I'm Katherine Given, Senior Style and Market Editor at Luxe Interiors and Design Magazine. Thanks for tuning in to today's Enlightened Kitchen segment with Kohler Lighting. I am thrilled to be joined by the very talented Erin Hoover. She is the Design Director for Kohler's Luxury Space. Hi, Erin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I am really looking forward to chatting about lighting, which, as we all know, can completely transform a space when used correctly, especially in the kitchen. But I think I know it's also secretly your favorite product category, right? Am I allowed to mention that?
Yes, I know. It's like, don't let my other product categories know. But yes, I have a passion for decorative lighting. Love it. So I am so thrilled to be here to talk to you about lighting in the kitchen.
So I'm hoping before we dive in, you can just give us a little bit of background on Kohler Lighting. I know it officially launched a year or two ago, but it's certainly evolved since then, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Kohler's always had an eye on the future, and we're always looking for ways that we can infuse our customers, sort of space with, their personality. And lighting is really that final piece. So I think, Kohler really decided to go into decorative lighting in a big way. And certainly, I think you'll see the breadth of the collections that we're going to talk about today really demonstrate that.
Definitely. I mean, we know that, when you introduce lighting in a different finish or a different color, it really has such an impact in a room. And I think, you mentioned this, Erin, when we were talking earlier, people are having a lot of fun with lighting, right? It's sort of how you put your personal stamp, on a space now, I think.
Yes, I think it's so true. We've really seen a transition, certainly since I started in design, where, lighting for the kitchen used to be, functional, not that it was, not that it was bad, a little bit functional, but now, it really is a statement. I think people, to your point, are getting much more adventurous. They want to show their personal flair. And it's also, I think, because of the open plan kitchen. So, the kitchen is no longer an enclosed space in most homes. You see it from other parts of your home. So just as you are concerned with, the decor and the design of your living and dining areas, then the kitchen becomes that much more important. So we have more of a statement about decorative lighting.
Definitely. I 100% agree with you. And I'm so excited, when I saw these new collections, when I saw Kohler Lighting's newest collections, my mouth, opened up because I thought they were so high design. They're so beautiful. Not only can you use them in the kitchen, but I could sort of envision, them in a number of rooms. So I'm hoping you can walk us through the latest collections and just talk a little bit about design inspiration or even the process. Sure. Do you want to start with Arendella? I love that collection.
Yeah. Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much. We are so proud of these collections, and I am thrilled to be talking to you about them. So Arendella, we started with, there's a vintage fixture that was made by Vistosi, an Italian designer, back in the 60s, which has this beautiful glass disc that is suspended from a lightweight metal frame. So we took some inspiration from that, but we also took inspiration from the briolette, which is a gem cut where the entire gem is faceted. And so it creates this beautiful refraction of light. So you'll see that when you look at Arendella, we've got this beautiful lightweight metal frame that holds this gorgeous faceted lens. And I have to say, and I will say this for all of the lighting, I know we're doing a lot of shopping online these days. If you can see these fixtures in person, the detail is just beautiful. So I've seen this actually illuminated, and the effect that you get from the light is just stunning. So, it's a gorgeous collection. We have chandeliers, we have sconces, we have linears. So really you can just do it up.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the faceting, because I completely see that here. It really resonates with me. And when it is illuminated, it just glows, right? It really creates that pretty effect. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. But I have to say, Vorley is actually my favorite. I really love that the slim profile in some of the pieces was so sophisticated.
Yeah, well, Vorley is, so there's an interesting story behind Vorley. So Vorley, we were inspired by a vintage fixture from the 1930s that is in the collection of one of our leaders in design for Kohler, Seth Stevens, who's chief designer for luxury. So he had this in his collection, and you know, I had actually seen pictures of it. It's so funny. He sent me pictures of it, and we both sort of had this moment where we said, "Oh, let's use that as the basis for one of our collections." So it's got a very sort of Bauhaus inspired, sort of beautiful form. But the trick with this one, and this is what I think you'll find in a lot of the collections we're going to talk about today, is the shade actually pivots. So that means you can either direct it downwards, so your light will go downwards, or you can angle it towards the wall, or you could angle it out towards the room, again, depending on the fixture that you're working with. So what this does for the consumer is that they can then personalize this fixture. No one's ever going to style your fixture the way somebody else did. So again, it's another way to make it very unique, very personalized. So just, yeah, absolutely stunning fixture.
And how smart in the kitchen, right? Where you can sort of direct light kind of where you need sometimes. That's genius.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So Erin, talk to me about Hawksby. That is also really a lovely, lovely collection.
Yes. Oh, so I love this collection. We were very much inspired by, you know, industrial lighting, factory lighting, sort of looking at some vintage references. But, you know, while we look at vintage references, we always do think about, you know, a modern setting. We're not doing reproduction, sort of industrial lighting, but we definitely took that as our point of inspiration. And it's got some wonderful details. So in the sconces, you have this beautiful gooseneck detail on the neck, and then you have some really beautiful trim details and connections. But really for this collection, the star of the show is the finishes. This is where you'll see my passion, my love for lighting, because you have got some really fantastic options here. So you've got a white metal shade with a chrome trim detail. You've got a white metal shade with a brushed brass trim detail. Then you've got a black metal shade with a brushed brass trim detail. And then finally, there's an all chrome option. So, you know, totally changes the personality of the fixture. And again, depending on, you know, the effect or, you know, your personal aesthetic that you're going for, you can have so much fun with this collection.
Yeah, I love all the options. And I have to say, I'm really gravitating towards that black. I usually don't, but it's really such a rich color.
Yeah, it's really stunning. It's really stunning.
And last but not least is Perone, which again is one of my favorites.
Yes. So Perone, we really looked at, you know, again, you know, we go back to some vintage references. We're looking at a lot of lighting from like the 1930s and 40s. I'm a huge fan of Tommy Parzinger, who is a great designer who did work starting in the 30s and on into the 70s. And he always was able to do this very tailored design that had like a little bit of glamour, a little bit of drama. So what you'll see in this fixture is the proportion of that shade. So it's got a kind of a dramatic taper, but then it's got this beautiful trim detail at the top and the bottom of the shade. And then like this beautiful decorative ball sort of on the stem. And the great thing about this fixture, not only the wonderful range of finishes that it comes in, but I've seen it merchandised in sort of more of a modern aesthetic. I've seen it in a traditional aesthetic, which, you know, you're like, okay, all right. But I also saw it recently in more of like a rustic sort of design aesthetic. And it has a lot of breadth. So just a fantastic, you know, shaded fixture, very dramatic, very glamorous.
You're right. It does hit a lot of notes, which is nice. And again, congratulations on these collections because they are so beautiful. But I want to make sure that we do touch on, you know, lighting in the kitchen and really how you can harmonize these, you know, pieces with the rest of the home and how you integrate. So I think people sometimes think that they need to have very technical lighting, right? The track lighting or, you know, sort of those pieces, but, you know, you can easily use any number of, you know, the designs that we just discussed in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, again, as kitchen design has evolved, I mean, you know, I remember, you know, I'm probably dating myself, but I remember when, you know, all you had was like one ceiling mounted fixture in the, you know, it was usually a flush mount in the kitchen and, you know, that was it. Now you'll have multiple sources of lighting. And so, you know, while our fixtures certainly, you know, they certainly put out a lot of light, you will usually have multiple sources of lighting in your kitchen. And I think it's a good thing to think about when you're selecting a fixture. Of course, we want the aesthetic, we want the sort of, you know, the wonderful design to sort of, you know, be first and foremost. But I think you can also think a little bit about the kind of light that you want to have in the kitchen. So for example, Hawksby, which is a fantastic fixture, it will tend to direct the light more downward because it's a metal shade. If you wanted to do light that's sort of going to be directed a little bit more all over, you could certainly go with one of the fabric shades. Arundella, certainly with the glass shade, will direct the light sort of more over. So just something to think about, not only the aesthetic, but also, where is the light going to be, most of the light going to be directed. So I think that's something that people can think about when they're selecting their light fixtures.
That's a great point. And let's just touch on finishes briefly, because, you give us tons of options here with these collections. And it's nice sometimes to continue finishes throughout the house, right? Or throughout the home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really evolved now. First of all, Kohler, we give you such a range of finishes. And, now I think people are much more attuned to finishes. They're much more aware of, how they want to treat their finishes in the home. So, certainly you can finish match. You can certainly have a very coordinated, seamless look. In my home, that's sort of my aesthetic. So I'm for that more sort of seamless look. But finish matching, finish mixing is certainly something that's a huge trend. And that's how you can update a space. Nothing, I believe, nothing will update a space more quickly and more easily than changing out your decorative lighting. And that's where you can have some fun. If you have, let's say you have a brushed brass, like we were just talking about Hawksby, you have a brushed brass faucet in your kitchen, then do that sort of mixed finish with that, with the black and the brass, or, you can be even more daring and sort of go in a little polished nickel, mix with the brass, which that always works. So, I think it's an easy way to play around with these ideas. And, I think the effect is always, wonderful.
I agree. It's nice to have some fun in the kitchen, right? Like, as you said, you have different fittings and faucets that might have, a finish, and then you add, your lighting as another sort of layer, and you just can kind of keep building and have a lot of fun. So, Erin, thank you so much for chatting. I always love, your viewpoint, and your design aesthetic is so interesting. And, it's so nice to see how you can, all you can do to enhance the kitchen, right? It really takes a few new lighting fixtures.
Oh, yes. I am 100% a believer in that. They always say lighting is the jewelry of the room. So I think, I'm so glad that we're able to offer this at Kohler now. So we have that perfect accent that finishes off your beautiful kitchen with the rest of your Kohler products.
Thanks again. I'm such a fan of these new Kohler lighting collections. I think I might need one of those Hawksby pieces above, a kitchen island, but thanks so much. And to our viewers, we appreciate you tuning in, and see you next time.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Metropolis Think Tank Thursdays. I'm Tina Brennan, Vice President of Marketing at Metropolis, and we're very grateful to have you with us. Today, we are very pleased to be hosted by Paige in Austin, who will be discussing how building and neighborhood come together to create a flagship for sustainable design that supports employees' well-being and engages the community. Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like Paige and our incredible sponsors. We like to thank Certainteed, show-stopping ceilings and walls that achieve the extraordinary for every space and every budget. DuPont Tedler, PVF film for every surface worth protecting. Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. Kimball, designing the spaces where you can work your way. Mannington Commercial, crafting flooring with purpose for more than 100 years. And Versteel, a solutions provider of American-made furnishings for working and learning environments. And now I would like to introduce today's moderator, Metropolis's editor-in-chief, Avi Rajagopal. Avi?
Thank you so much, Tina. And thank you all so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you for our first think tank in the month of May here, hosted by Paige in Austin. When we're looking at sustainable architecture and design, there's really two leading fronts. One is, of course, as our buildings get more efficient, as we hone our skills in building more sustainable structures, more sustainable spaces, we've learned that we have to leverage opportunities that might be available, not just within the building or within the sort of scheme of a project itself, but opportunities that might lie outside in connections with the neighborhood, in connections to the city. And so thinking about larger systems is really a key aspect of building in a planet positive and climate positive way today. The second thing, of course, is putting a focus back on people. And, the pandemic has certainly taught those of us who were slow to that lesson, a reminder in that, right? That the most sustainable building needs to serve, the people who are in it, as well as the people who are around it, the people who come in contact with it. And so how do we bring inputs from both internal stakeholders, employees, occupants, residents, staff, as well as external engagements with the community outside. The project we're going to talk about today as an example, which is the headquarters for Austin Energy, is a fantastic example of both of those fronts. And it is so because it has a really unique and pretty incredible connection to the neighborhood in which it is located. So we're going to today talk about greening cities through the kind of really the cumulative and positive connections between site, community, and building. To help do that today, we have a fantastic group of panelists for you. We have with us America Alva, who's project architect with Paige. America, thanks so much for joining us. We have Bill Hui, who is a senior associate with Paige. Bill, such a pleasure to have you. We have Greg Weaver, who is the executive vice president of Catellus, who are the developers behind the Mueller neighborhood in Austin. Greg, looking forward to hearing more. Mueller is a case study in the U.S. Which it was formerly the site of Austin's airport. And just an amazing example of creating a green connected neighborhood. I'm sure you'll hear more about that. And also with us today is Mark Dombrowski, who is the CFO at Austin Energy. Mark, such a pleasure to have you with us today. Austin Energy, of course, is one of the pioneers of sustainability in the country and the creators of the country's first green building program way back in 1993. So that is pre-LEED, for those of you who might not know that. So thank you so much, Mark. Such a pleasure to have you on the panel today. Bill, I'd like to start with you. It would be wonderful if you could introduce us to the Austin Energy Headquarters project. I believe you have a small presentation for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Avi and Tina, for that great introduction. It's so exciting to be presenting this project to you guys. The current Zoom universe allows people from all over the world to join us. It's just amazing. So this is a real treat. I hope everyone can see on their screen right now a very short slide deck we'll step through, but this is only a portion of the Miller development that you can see. In the foreground is what's being built out as sort of the newest entertainment district part of the development, but it's a multi-phase project that's been going on for, gosh, over 15 years, and Greg can certainly speak to that later, but we're now, you can see projects under construction in this aerial photo, and it's just so exciting to see Miller really turning into such an important part of the city. You can, I'm trying to move people around. Let's see. You can see the proximity to downtown and the university. It's really only a short distance, a little bit northeast of the central business district of Austin. And as you say, Avi, it's the former airport. So it's, I think those of us with long memories in Austin remember being stuck in traffic on Interstate 35 and seeing the plane swoop overhead to land at Austin Bergstrom. I mean, Old Austin Airport. So quick introduction. Bill Huey, Senior Associate at Page. I was project manager for this project. America Alva was project architect, but I think most importantly for our purposes, one of the lead building science and sustainability coordinators for the project as well. Greg with Catullus, Greg Weaver, and Mark Dombrowski, CFO at Austin Energy. This is another view of that Aldrich Entertainment District being built out, and you can see kind of in the distance over here, we'll get a better view of project sites. But one of the really things to look at here is just appreciate the amount of green space that the Miller development has provided for folks who live and work and play in that neighborhood, as well as the preservation of some of those vestiges of the old airport. So part of one of the old hangars was preserved and turned into a performance space. There's an old hangar in another part of the development that was preserved for Austin Film Society for use as a sound studio. All these elements that really speak to the careful preservation of the assets that the old airport could provide while creating this really great living space for the city. So Miller is a really special spot. You can see a farmer's market inside that old hangar set up on the weekends. There's a Alamo Drafthouse Theater that Page was involved in as part of that entertainment district. And it really does get choked with people on the weekends in normal times. maybe not this Friday, but soon, coming soon again. And a kind of a neighborhood that was born of close coordination with the surrounding community. I think one important thing to think about is the old airport was surrounded by some lower income neighborhoods that was around an airport. And so Catullus in developing the community did tons of community outreach. I'm going to brag on them a little bit because it was so impressive the way the city and Catullus together partnered to make sure that the development itself would not only serve the needs of folks who lived in there, but also be an asset for the broader community. So just some quick statistics: almost 2 million square feet of institutional space. So there's a new hospital complex there. And then there's office space. And then of course a huge residential component. My wife's parents live in a affordable senior living apartment complex in Miller, and they love it. So it's just, I'm gushing a little bit, but it's really hard to say too many good things about it. So former life as the old airport, Austin unwittingly land banked this great treasure right near downtown with this airport. And one of the great icons of the development still is the air traffic control tower that you see in the background. And actually, discerning eye can see it looming over Greg's shoulder in the background, a painting of the control tower that's still, it's been preserved, and it doesn't show up in this photograph, but that characteristic green spandrel glass from the 50s has been preserved. Here's a photo of that old airport, that old hangar has found new life, and some folks. I'm going to place them at 1958, 59 by the hat style coming off the plane. So let's take a little bit closer look at the area that we're going to look at today. So Paige has been really privileged to play a part in the build out of several spots right in this area, right around the Austin Energy headquarters. So Austin Energy headquarters is here, and across the street is the Dell Children's Hospital. That entertainment district I mentioned is, oh, sorry guys, there we go. Is right in here, but it's surrounded by some housing, again, a lot of 2, 3, 4 bedroom apartments with certain percentages of below market rate housing reserved to it. So Amway has been a developer building out several of those projects. And then as you get closer to the main thoroughfare here of Miller Boulevard, more office space. So Shorenstein is building a office building here, and then they have another one planned for this lot across from Austin Energy. So it's just, well, in Central Texas parlance, it's going gangbusters, and really cool to see. Let's see. So a interior view of the courtyard of one of those Amway residences. Here's another view of exterior of a different phase, and the Shorenstein office building that's being built out. So again, huge privilege to be a part of this. And the Austin Energy headquarters. I should mention Paige was architect of record, executive architect on this project. Design architect was ELS Architects based in Berkeley. One thing you can see from this image is that it's a large building. It's 275,000 square feet of office space. But in keeping with the design standards of the Miller New Construction Council, which is provides oversight about new construction within the development. The building is disarticulated in these different volumes of smaller buildings. Again, all one building, but it's kind of disaggregated a little bit into separate volumes, and then tied together by the kind of icon of solar generation that really brings all the buildings together. Focus of the building has been wellness for its users, energy efficiency, lowering carbon footprint. And we'll talk about that soon. Oh, wellness and the movement through the building really being invited by these great monumental stairs that create spaces for gathering and for moving through the space. So with that, I will hand the baton back, Avi. That is kind of the broad overview of this project, and yeah, as it nears completion, we're really excited to see folks move in and start using the spaces.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Bill. That was fantastic, and thank you for really taking us through, the history of the site all the way to the building. And I'm sure we're going to get into the details of the building by and by. Very exciting, of course. those certification levels, as well as the attention to embodied energy. Really, really fantastic on that project. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the more experiential and the wellness components of the buildings as well. Just a quick reminder to everyone in the audience, please, you are more than welcome to get us questions anytime you'd like during today's event. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to bring up questions with the panelists today, and we'll start taking your questions in just a few minutes here, but just until we've heard from all of the panelists here. But keep them coming, and we'll start taking them in just a few minutes. Okay, Mark, I'd love to bring you in here as the client on the project, Austin Energy. Tell us a little bit about what that location choice looked like from your perspective. Austin Energy, as we said before, it's a community-owned utility company, and it is also, as we said, a pioneer in sustainability. And I know both of those things, I'm sure, influenced your decision. Just love to hear what your thinking was behind choosing the location and kind of how the building is sited and constructed there.
Love to. So a little bit about Austin Energy is we've been in business for 125 years. We originally dammed the Colorado River, creating a shoreline for downtown Austin. And so we really helped shape the city of Austin. We're really proud of that. And we're proud of our environmental record. We're the largest producers of wind energy in Texas and soon to be solar as well. And that is developed by the values of our community who own Austin Energy. And so about 10 years ago, we realized that we needed to relocate our corporate office. We had grown with the city. When I first moved here as a very young child, there was about 250,000 people in Austin. We're well over 1 million now, I think. In Austin, about 2.5 or 3 million for the statistical area, so it's much larger. We have employees at 3 different locations, and so we own one downtown, and then we have a rented space that's close by, and then a utility contact center that is in the southwest part of town. And it's difficult to feel like you're part of a family when you're so separated across the city. So about 10 years ago, we started looking for an office. And I think our real emphasis was to get out of where we were without a lot of thought about where we were going to be. And so we had a lot of missteps, false starts, and we really fell back and we used the 3P model to bring us forward to where we are. And we really focused on 2 things. One was employees and community, and trying to connect the 2 of those. And so we wanted to ensure their employees had a safe, sustainable, aesthetically pleasing, environment that offered them alternatives to commute and to work and to view themselves as a part of the community. So from the very beginning, we started with 6 large groups of employee volunteers that worked with us to help think about sustainability, what furniture we'd have in it, the colors, the textures, the artwork that would be in it, the amenities, and also our community involvement, because we wanted to be a good neighbor in Miller development. They even selected floor themes and the conference room names that really connected us to Austin's landscape, culture, and history. And so Miller development is a natural connection to that. And as far as being a part of the community, we knew that we needed to be an example. From the very beginning, we wanted to be a LEED Platinum, WELL building, Austin Energy Green Building 5-star. We knew that we had to be the example for the community. And so Miller Development has really had a focus on sustainability. That's made the investment. And so it was a very low cost effort to get us to our goals in there. They have an investment in chilled water. They have reclaimed water, the trail systems, the open space, the walkability organization. That's also a transit oriented district. So we gave our employees lots of options to commute to work. And so it really worked out well. And finally, the rich history of the Miller Airport, it was just a natural connection for our community-owned headquarters to be at the Miller Airport. And so I think, between Page and Catellus and Harvey Cleary, our contractor, we all worked very closely together, and it was a beautiful thing. It met all of our expectations and exceeded some. And as employees walk into the building, they've got a mindset of their traditional office space, which quite honestly, after being in a new building, is almost depressing. but the employees come in and it's almost like a whole new world for them. They're seeing themselves work in different ways all over the place. We're 5G ready. They can work indoors, outdoors, small teams, lots of space, lots of air, literally with open space, exterior lighting coming in, the courtyard. And so I think we're going to see a tremendous increase in our employee morale and engagement simply by moving into the new building. And so for us, sustainability was a must. Aesthetics was a want to have, and we were fortunate to be able to combine all of that together.
That's fantastic, Mark. I mean, I think you've really spoken to sort of, how layered this thinking around a project as big as this has to be. Talking about sort of the symbolism of the site, as well as the idea that that Austin Energy had to be an exemplar, right? Both to other people who might be building buildings in Austin and and energy efficiency to them, but also in terms of how you engage with your community. And I'd love to hear more about that. I'm sure the audience will have some questions for you about that as well. But thank you so much for that, Mark. Craig, I'd like to bring you in here. Obviously you're seeing, and I'm sure you've heard this so many times from other folks who've chosen to make Miller their home. This connection to site, the connection to the history, and especially when we're talking about sustainability of building it, operating at LEED version 4 platinum level, that is impossible without this symbiotic relationship between a building and its site, its surroundings, its neighbors, Austin Energy, I bet, is one of the greenest buildings in Miller, but certainly there's plenty of sustainable building in Miller, and so. I just love to hear how you think about that relationship between the development Miller, which Bill spoke about so wonderfully at the start of this discussion, and individual buildings like the Austin Energy headquarters. How do you see the two kind of feeding off of each other?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Avi. And before I talk about it, I saw Gail Vittori is in the audience here, and she is. She's really the architect of this whole thing from a sustainability standpoint. So if I say anything wrong, Gail, please correct me in the chat or in the Q&A. She literally is the one, and I believe I'm bragging on her a little bit here, but she was one of the founders of Austin Energy green building concepts way back when, before USGBC or this, LEED was in place, and then has evolved with the USGBC. And she was, when I moved to Austin in 2002, she is the one who sat me down to educate me on this, the whole green building sustainability thing. So I give my nod to Gail and give her a lot of credit. I'm saying that half jokingly, but very seriously, because she's been the stalwart in Austin, Texas, nationally, and then specific to this project here. So it's unique, right? You have 700 acres of land. That's a brownfield, that's urban infill, that's redevelopment. And so one of the things I like to say from a sustainability about this project is we recycle the land. You kind of start from there at the core of what this is. And it had to be remediated, from the former airport industrial use to then the deconstruction. We call it deconstruction because we tried to use as much of the materials on site, whether it was old runways and tarmacs that we recycled and used as base in the roads, or under the first building here is the Dell Children's Hospital. And a lot of the parking area and base for that building is old runways and old tarmacs out there. Some of the old hangars are actually barns now in Texas, in and around Texas, that were deconstructed and reused. So, you kind of look at it from the core of that standpoint. And then from the community standpoint, I think the community came together in the late 80s and the 90s when the whole rumor mill and kind of discussion of relocating the airport came about. And the community came together and said, hey, and with the city and said, hey, before we start putting lines on paper, what are the goals? What are the goals and missions of the project? And then once we put those goals together, then we'll start putting lines on paper of, roads and open space and everything else. And so the community went through a long, exhaustive process with the city, with themselves, with stakeholders, and said what's important. And I won't go through all of them; they're all on our website. But a big one was, it was one of the 6 pillars, if you will, was sustainability. And at that time, it was, you think late 80s and 90s. What that meant was pretty broad at that point. And then as everything started coming together in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, sustainability really started getting honed into something real. I won't repeat everything. Mark talked about a lot of it. Bill talked a lot about it, from the chilled water systems to the reclaimed water to, just water quality and detention, which, in Texas, you get a lot of water, and a lot of it was, put in detention ponds, but people weren't really thinking through water quality. When the water drains into a creek, like, is it clean? And it goes into the, into the lake. That's ultimately our drinking water. And so Ed Miller, and a credit to a lot of people, to the city of Austin, to the community, to really smart, respected people like a Gail Vittori that came together and really put it all together. And today, and talk about Austin Energy, what to me really unique for Austin Energy and many other companies, and I think for Austin Energy, it's kind of talk the talk and walk the walk. You're right, where this is a partnership with the city of Austin. Austin Energy is a part of the city. And, Austin Energy is the greenest sustainable utility energy company in the United States, and kind of landing their footprint dead center in this community, embracing it and coming out, as LEED Platinum really is amazing. And I think that, what we try to talk about from corporate employees is you have this mixed income community with pricing, whether it's, we have apartment units that are affordable to folks that make 20% of MFI, median family income. And then you have and pricing all the way through on the for sale, where you have homes affordable to executives. And it's a pedestrian friendly non-auto dependent, mixed use, transit oriented development. I could start using every little, planning principle out there. It's all of that. And so from us, and this is probably Catellus, and we're seeing this throughout the United States, is the desire from a corporate entity to locate in a community like that is really, really attractive, because they need to, one, be in a community that the younger generation want to live in, which is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more active, a little bit more 24-hour. They want to be in a place that exudes their corporate culture, and a lot of that's the sustainability component. They want to be in a community that their employees can live, work, and play. I think Bill, talked about that earlier. And Miller has all of that. And I give a lot of credit. The city of Austin did an amazing job on this, where they went together and put a master plan together before picking a developer. Catellus gets a lot of credit for it, but the city of Austin deserves the credit of going through this great planning process. And the community does too. With the community, there were 12 neighborhoods that joined arms together to form the Miller Neighborhood Coalition. And between the coalition and the city, they put this great master plan together. We were the lucky ones that got the opportunity to execute on it. And it's a great success. And, really the true test was convincing Mark here to, because he doesn't live near Miller, and we joke about it now. We just closed on the deal a couple weeks ago, and we had a very small, socially distanced celebration, and convincing the CFO or the CEO, the general manager in this case, to move their corporate headquarters somewhere. Usually 10, 15 years ago, you would say, where does the CEO live? Where does the CFO live? And that's probably where the corporate headquarters is going to be. Well, this was not the case. We had to go convince Mark and Jackie where, what the right place was for Austin Energy and their employees and everything else. And so that was the hardest part of this whole thing. So we were super excited when they decided to pick us and build the headquarters at Miller.
Thanks so much, Greg. It is, as you say, I think deep work done with great foresight for many years. I only know Gail through the pages of Metropolis, but it's wonderful to have you here with us, Gail. And just seeing that long journey kind of reach a milestone with such an amazing sort of project, as you said, at the heart of it. That's really incredible. Again, I'm sure we'll dig in a little bit more into the process of sort of, how one builds those incentives and how one kind of, builds that sort of great context for people to come and populate as we talk further. I'd love to bring America back in here to take us back to the building itself, to Austin Energy itself. Bill spoke very briefly about sort of the overall kind of configuration of the building, some of the sustainability features and the focus on wellness. But America, I'd love to hear if you can take us a little deeper into just a couple of design features at the project that were born out of this connection to the site or the community. And then we have some audience questions coming up as well. Just before America jumps in, of course, everybody else in the audience, if you have any questions for us, please go ahead and put them in Q&A. We'll start taking them in just a few minutes here. Go ahead, America.
Sure. I'd love to answer that question. I want to just start by saying that one of the most sustainable things that we can do is to connect locations and build in an environment that has reliable networks, resources, and services. And as Mark was saying, Austin Energy was fortunate enough to land a spot in the Miller development that truly embodied those core principles of sustainability. So it's just a perfect match. What I would say are the three foundational systems that really help shape our building are as follows. The first thing is the energy systems. Our project was able to connect to an energy system at a district level that really alleviated some of the pressures that our building had to fulfill. It not only saved us spatially, but mechanical. It just made our building much more reliant and energy efficient. So that's the district chilled water that both Mark and Greg were talking about. The other thing I would say is connectivity. Miller being the neighborhood that it is, it brought so many amenities to our project, literally at our doorstep. So we were able to review the programming and really look to see what programming we could eliminate because those services or that programming was better served by the open space amenities that Miller provides and by the local businesses. So how better can you connect with your community, but by investing in going into these local businesses and supporting them. So in our case, we were able to eliminate cafeteria. We didn't really have to program a cafeteria, and we also eliminated a fitness center. And when you look at those two things, what those two things really did was provided Austin Energy the opportunity to dedicate public space on their ground floor level. So at the ground floor level, there are two assembly spaces that not only will be utilized by Austin Energy, but are offered to the community and the community at large. So organizations, community groups can meet and engage in these spaces. The space we gained also supports Austin Energy's commitment to education. They have educational programs with Austin ISD, K through 12. So now they have a space to really do that. And they even have now the opportunity to expand on some of those relationships and perhaps start engaging Miller District for other opportunities, such as with the Thinkery that's just a few blocks away. The other component to that is the Austin Energy store. It was really important to have a storefront for Austin Energy where customers could come in and learn about the latest Energy Star equipment, learn about their rebate programs, what they would qualify for, and just general knowledge of how to make your home more sustainable and just promoting that sustainability beyond the Miller District. So the final thing I would touch upon is the mobility, multi-mobility aspect of Miller. Miller's commitment to reducing auto dependency really gives the opportunity to employees and customers to move in and out of the Miller District using any mode of transportation they want to. So it's a well-integrated neighborhood with public transportation. There are plenty of dedicated bicycle lanes and pedestrian-friendly sidewalks and pathways. So our building was able to capitalize on those things, and we dedicated a great deal of bicycle storage so that employees could come and use that when they travel to and from work. We provided enough space for personal locker rooms and shower facilities, and that not only promoted Austin Energy's goals of having a healthier and wellness aspects to their employees, but it also supported the Miller District's initiatives of creating this community that was walkable and small and intimate. So and then finally, I would say the fact that the top of the garage is actually designed for future office expansion just kind of drives us, because we know that as Austin is moving toward a more urban phase, and cars are becoming less needed. Austin Energy already has that in play for their next 5 to 10 years, being able to grow in their space without having to look for another location. So I would say those three systems that came from the Mueller site really shaped our building and really gave us the boost we needed to reach those LEED and AGB aspirations, as well as the wellness building.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, America, for like really grounding the discussion in those three systems, because I think now it kind of pulls together threads of things that Bill, Greg, and Mark all talked about, right? Talking about sort of the importance of the infrastructure that's available, the energy system that's available, the importance of really engaging both internal communities and external communities for Austin Energy, but also kind of create, allowing new development to kind of support the community. And I love that idea of, both the giving of public space, but also the kind of connection through supporting businesses and encouraging employees to go out and spend their money in the district with businesses that are from that community. So just fantastic. And then of course, transit, which, somebody from our audience has also picked up on. I'd love to just bring up one question to all of you, and we can just get some brief responses to this. But before we do that, a quick thank you to Paige for bringing us all together today and for giving us an opportunity to discuss this really amazing project as an exemplar of what can happen when sustainable master planning, sustainable community development, and sustainable building development come together. That's really incredible. A big thank you also to our sponsors today, Certainteed, DuPont Tedlar, Growy, Kimball, Manhattan Commercial, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. We're going to have a second poll question coming up for everybody who's in the audience. Please take a second to respond to it if you can. In the meantime, I'd love to ask the panelists about sort of the different types of community engagement that were involved in this project. So obviously this idea of public space, the idea of, the connection to local educational institutions and all of that doesn't come from nowhere. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you hit upon those priorities. And then Mark, of course, I'd also love to hear, what the engagement process was with Austin Energy's own employees in order to understand, as Greg pointed out, you moved headquarters to a neighborhood that's and your choice is not driven by where you live, apparently, which is fantastic. So just tell us a little bit about how you engage with your employees. So whichever one of you wants to go first, I'd love to hear about that engagement process.
Sure, I'll take the lead. So Austin Energy, we're owned by our community. So not only do we have input from our employees, but as well as the community itself. So we have Electric Utility Commission and Resource Management Commission that we respond to, as well as our city council. And so the idea of maximizing sustainability was high on everyone's priority when it comes to our governance structure. So we never had to do an upsell to make that happen, which is a huge advantage. As being the CFO, I'm not sure we can afford not to be sustainable at this point. So it penciled out very well for us. When it came to the employees, we had, I wish I could claim it was our idea, but early on we had visited with our closest neighbor, Texas Mutual Insurance, which had just finished their building in Miller Development as well. And while we were giving the tour there, they were kind enough to allow us to have our executive team meet there, and we had lunch in there to learn about the neighborhood. They had told me about how they engaged some of their employees. And so I thought that was a great idea. And so we created these 6 teams of employees, and we had so many volunteers that we had to have interview panels in order to select the employees, so we had maximum participation. And we tried to mix it up so that, you know, it was a natural fit. Like some folks that were in our green buildings program all want to be on the sustainability committee. And so what we tried to mix it up so everyone got to say so. So and we broke up into 2 groups. One was the Sustainability Commission that really designed about how, not so much the features of the building, because that was really led to the professionals, the lead folks, the architects, but really how do the employees relate to the building itself? And they're going to have a long, arduous task as employees learn to work within this type of environment. Everything from not having trash receptacles in their offices to recycling. You know, so that group still has much more work to do. But we also engaged the team to help us with furniture selection. They're going to be using it. They're going to be sitting in it. So we thought it was important to engage them and help select that. And of course, there were confines within our well building standards and our LEED standards. And so those employees learned about that, and they became, they will become our ambassadors. And so if they want to know why something happens, well, they'll know why, then they'll spread the word and how it benefits them. We wanted to make a close connection. As I said, we've been in Austin for 125 years, we're very connected to the community. And so we really wanted to make sure it reflected the Austin community. So we had another group of employees that worked with us on floor themes. So one floor is about art and culture. One is local flora and fauna. One is historical Austin. And our conference rooms are named after icons in Austin. So those of you who remember Armadillo World Headquarters from back in the 80s, we have a conference room there. We have the Saxon Pub Room. We have the Barton Springs Room. So, you know, it really pulls in history. So if you're a local Austinite, it'll be a walk down memory lane. If you're new to Austin, it'll be a great history lesson. And of course, we wanted to pull in the community. And so, as we pointed out, that we have connections with AISD, whose Performing Arts building is right down the street from us. But we also have the Thunkery, which is a wonderful place to bring children and old folks like me that like to touch stuff to learn about things. But we can create synergies with them to help bring in young people to find out about sustainable practices. So we intend to have public tours through our building. As you walk in the front door, you'll see what is on our terrazzo floor, what was the original Colorado River, and then how we changed the flow of that river that created the landscape of Austin itself as it is today. So they'll get a history lesson to learn about the great floods. We're also going to learn about renewable energy. We talked about the store. So not only is it a place to go and learn about things you actually can buy and use, but about how does wind turbines work? How does solar power work? What are the benefits of that? So the idea is to bring a community center there and not just an office building for us. So the employees were a part of all of that planning, and they will be in the future.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Mark. Bill, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, you know, one of the things that I didn't realize Austin Energy was so involved in, and again, I not to repeat anything Mark said, but I was so impressed by the educational outreach to the community. And there's they've developed their own school curriculum, as America said, for K through 12. I had no idea about any of that before I started working with Austin Energy on this project. And they actually hired an education consultant during the project who helped interface with the AISD, Austin School District, and other school districts for us to understand what's going to be most valuable in the space to make that happen. And you know, us, the naive architects, thought, oh, well, we'll have little places for folks to gather and groups of 15 or 20, and they said, no. We need to have like 200 kids come in and be entertained by a video for 30 minutes and then disperse out to some other thing. We need school buses to come in and stack up and offload kids for these programs. And so it really we had to totally recalibrate how we were thinking, how these shared assembly spaces were going to work to really serve the mission of Austin Energy. So that was all it was a great education for me, because of course, once we started talking to those folks, yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I've never taught a third grade class. So this, it was so helpful to have that. They're already so engaged in the community that they were able to really facilitate those connections and strengthen them.
Absolutely. Why don't we start taking some of the audience questions here? Our first couple of questions really are more building science and sustainability strategies related. So might be more for Bill in America here. Eric Olson asks, are y'all working on improving the embodied emissions footprint of your materials and all of the inputs into these projects and sites? It's cool that during a building's lifetime, we can cater it to a smaller footprint, but what about all the inputs in construction? And Oliver Hardy had a question as well in terms of, how do you work on that embodied energy piece? So, I mean, that's an evolving conversation in our industry. All of us are working really hard to pull down that number. But I'd love to hear if that was addressed in this project and how you went about that.
I'm going to defer to America because she worked on exactly this issue.
Sure. So Austin Energy being the client they were really concerned about reducing embodied energy for this building. And so we had Walter P. Moore, Dirk Kestner, on our project to really come in and evaluate the embodied carbon of the structure and the envelope. And they did a fantastic job doing that. They took so for those who are not familiar with the LCA or life cycle assessment to calculate the embodied carbon, it's similar to an energy model. So Dirk helped set up a baseline model using standard practices, standard concrete mixes, and compared that to our current building. And he was able to advise the structural engineers where certain mixes could have more fly ash to reduce the embodied carbon going into it, and thin out some framing members that didn't necessarily need to be as thick as they needed to be in order to reduce, again, the key was reducing the concrete in this project because it's a concrete building. For the envelope, we assumed basically the same because it didn't have much of an impact. So those analyses were looked at and critically looked at, and we made some decisions based on that. I think at one point we also decided to cut about a foot. I may be remembering this wrong, but a foot out of each floor, just so that we would shrink the structure and again reduce that. And the other big factor was foundations. He really helped kind of guide the team in reducing how many foundation piers we needed. Again, thinking about what can we do to reduce the embodied carbon of this building from day one. So looking at all the process of the resourcing and the trucking of all that material. And in the end, we were quite successful. He stayed on the CA process, which is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, because you can design it, but you need to make sure that it goes from start to finish. And we were able to reduce embodied carbon overall by 10% in that LEED category. So we did use the LEED framework to analyze our building. And then on the material side, taking it in the interior side, we did analyze materials that were going in based on their own product declarations, their own LCAs. So for LEED, they have a credit for that, as well as the WELL building standard. And we leveraged that framework in order to specify as many products that had those disclosures and really think about products that are looking into reducing their embodied carbon.
Okay.
And Avi, I'm gonna pick up and talk a little bit more broadly about the energy modeling effort, because we haven't touched on a program that Austin Energy has called the integrated modeling incentive. It's the IMI rebate program. And as their own client in this project, they encouraged us to participate in that program, which we did with great enthusiasm. One thing though that it requires is building an energy model at the very beginning of design. So during schematic design, we began energy modeling. And there are many projects, many commercially driven projects that don't begin energy modeling that early in design. It's a big effort. But what it helped us do was analyze building systems on an integrated basis rather than singly. And so we were able to work through a number of design options. For example, we looked at triple pane glazing. What is the envelope efficiency that we're going to get out of triple pane versus the more typical double pane that you use in Central Texas? We were able to look at exposed concrete slab edges, and what was we actually engaged Morrison Hirschfield out of Toronto to do, out of I think Vancouver, sorry, to do an analysis of thermal heat gain at exposed slab edges to develop details to manage that most efficiently for our climate and for the Austin climate. So that was those were really efforts above and beyond that Austin Energy fully supported, and it was helpful to build that model so early and to be able to test things to be able to test strategies as we move through the design process. So it wasn't, and you're right, America, I've forgotten about shrinking the floor to floor heights because we were using a combined VAV and chilled beam system that let us really get away with a lot less plenum space than we might otherwise have needed. So we were able to, yeah, you got less building than you were expecting, Mark. You got, we saved a good amount of embodied energy that way.
That's so fantastic to hear, how those three processes, I think the energy modeling right at the beginning, which is super critical. Yes, it doesn't happen on every project, but it's fantastic, Mark, that, Austin Energy supported that, because that's just so vital. And then of course, the LCA on embodied energy, as our buildings get more efficient, as we start to use some of those, district energy efficiencies that are available in more places around the country now, that embodied energy piece is going to eat us alive on our carbon neutrality goals if we don't get a hold of it. So it's just fantastic to hear about that as well. And then the interiors, that very often gets left out of the conversation. So I'm really glad to hear about that as well. We're learning now that cumulative effect of interior renovations inevitable over you've built the project so that it can expand and it can grow over time, but over that time those interiors are going to get refitted out many times, and that footprint is going to add up to be almost equal to that of the envelope or the structure. So getting a good start on that with lower footprint on interior materials is really important. So that's absolutely great. Thank you so much for taking us through that in such detail. I think that was well worth it. Noel Mannerad from Page actually asks, how are the aspirational aspects of the project quantified into financial or other metrics? Maybe this is a Mark question too. Material reuse versus disposal, first cost and life cycle cost. Was there a metric based evaluation? Was this aspirational and designed as such due to community level goals and values? So Mark, was there a financial assessment of sort of the sustainability aspirations of this project? If so, did you use that to set goals?
It did. So, initially, like any good cost benefit analysis, started with sort of a status quo of what could we do to our current space to make it more sustainable and cost effective. We looked at some other alternatives to the Miller development as a part of our selection process. And really, the economics showed that new construction at Miller was the most cost effective in terms of construction and just in pure usability of square footage. I don't think people realize how much real estate you save when you have district cooling as opposed to your own chillers, when you're using chilled beams as a part of your cooling system, when you have the open spaces that you can easily control ambient light and temperature, that you really save a lot of real estate, which translates into cost savings as a building owner. And so using modern systems that are integrated together in the building was a huge cost saving for us. And so we did pencil all that. And it was interesting, and when we first got started, I always felt like we were pushing you guys about sustainability, do more and more to get to LEED Platinum. And what's interesting is, having never done this before, how much play there is between LEED requirements and well building, is that really complement each other. And so you're able to do more with the same dollar. And of course, when you pick a site like Miller Development, there's so much value in there already that I think we would have started out with LEED Gold without doing a whole lot. So just being at Miller and the attributes of Miller Development were a big help for us. And so certainly we penciled out everything, and it is the least cost effective method for us. And as stewards of public funds, it's important us to be able to document that as well.
Right. That seems like a cue for Greg, if there ever was one. Greg, I'd love to hear, and how, because it is so important to Miller to have sustainable development on site, because you have all these systems, infrastructure in place, that vision set in place right from the beginning, as you told us. How do you sort of make that case to organizations like Austin Energy or others who are looking to come make a home in Miller? How do you what are some of those sort of key cost benefits, key sort of well-being benefits or other benefits that you find help make the difference with the people you're speaking to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, our very first deal when we started the project in 2004 was the Children's Hospital, which is now the Dell Children's Hospital. And we did not have all of the, call it the requirements, the design guidelines, or the even the sustainability requirements done at that point. Actually, it was in 2003, so we hadn't actually closed on the deal yet. And so we're trying to convince the Children's Hospital to be LEED certified. And for those of you that were, in the business around in 2003, that was a brand new concept. And it was mainly governmental entities and, probably more environmental organizations that were trying to get LEED buildings. And the hospital is a private hospital system. So we tried to, convince them to do it. And again, I give the nod to Gail Vittori as their consultant at the time. The Ascension and Seton Healthcare, now Ascension, they did the math and they did the homework, and it was really a cost benefit analysis that they did. And they came out of the chute and said, we want to be LEED Platinum. And the idea of saying LEED Platinum in 2003, it had barely been done. And this hospital, the first phase is going to be 650,000 square feet. They probably didn't know the full cost at that point, like what they were saying when they said LEED Platinum. But what they did know, and it's kind of what Mark was talking about there, is that long-term, they're going to be a long-term owner. They'll be there 50 to 75 to 100 years. That cost benefit analysis from just a pure energy saving, cost reduction standpoint made all the sense in the world. So from a sustainability standpoint, we got really lucky that our first deal out of the chute came out as LEED Platinum. And so at that point, and so they set the bar really high, and we were thinking, oh, let's just make everyone be LEED certified. And then the first deal came out, and we were hand wringing about it. Would we be able to convince companies, to be LEED certified, let alone be LEED Platinum? And at that point, once the Children's Hospital deal happened, we deed restricted all 700 acres that they didn't have a choice at that point. And so Miller is deed restricted. So everyone who goes out there has to be minimum, I think we bumped it up to LEED Silver maybe. And this was in 2003, where LEED was really on commercial buildings. It wasn't on houses. It wasn't on retail. It wasn't on everything else. Well, what ended up happening is that other companies followed suit to try to set an example and use it as a prototype. And I'll use HEB as an example. And I think they ended up at LEED Gold for their grocery store. And it was the first time they'd ever done a LEED grocery store, and they used it as their prototype. It was kind of their petri dish for green building. And they threw everything at it, everything they could think of from a sustainability at it. And some things they would say today were successful, some and are in all of their prototype stores, and some are not. And then I'd say Texas Mutual. Mark mentioned Texas Mutual. I think Texas Mutual, just from what they wanted to do from a kind of a vision and corporate, kind of their corporate goals, if you will, from a sustainability, really leaned into it and looked at a lot of different aspects when they did it. So, long story, I'd say at Miller, a lot of these corporations, some of it looked at cost benefit. Some of them looked at it from kind of, hey, this is the mission and the goal of the corporation, of trying to again lean into the sustainability aspects of the buildings, their culture, and for employees. It's an important. My guess is Mark would say this too. Texas Mutual was definitely this way. They needed, Texas Mutual is a workers' compensation insurance company. And I would say this in front of Texas Mutual, it's not the sexiest, most exciting industry to go into, right? And so for them, they had an aging population in their employees, and they had to go to a community where the next generation, the millennials, would want to go to work at, and they're competing with the Googles and the Apples and the technology companies. So Texas Mutual looked at it as, we need a cultural change. We need kind of a game changer from a location, from an environment, from a culture, from all of it. And so it was a big part of Texas Mutual moving from kind of a 80s suburban, not too exciting environment. Like the closest restaurant, I think, was like an Applebee's or Chili's, that you had to walk through a couple parking lots to get to where they came to Miller and said, hey, we want to be in this mixed use environment. And there's actually a neat story where the idea of not having a cafeteria, as Austin Energy did, that was something that Texas Mutual wanted to do the same thing. And the CFO, Mike Barron, was tasked with the effort of finding a ground floor restaurant. And his favorite restaurant was Kirby Lane. And he literally called the owner of Kirby Lane and said, I want you to be our ground floor tenant of our cafe. And we heard about all this going on, and we're like, well, we'll see how all this plays out. And today, Kirby Lane, which for those of you that aren't Austinites, that's kind of a local loved, cafe in town. And today there's a ground floor Kirby Lane, and it serves both as a cafe for all of the community, but it also is kind of the back of the house, their cafeteria, where they cater and serve to the corporate events in the building. So kind of a neat little story there.
Yeah.
I did want to add one point. Somebody asked what metrics did we use. So we did the cost benefit, and we used net present value, but we did not include price of externalities. And so we know that can really skew results. We use absolute total ownership cost for various options. And so even at that, with LEED Platinum, well building, we still penciled out much better than our alternatives. So.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Good developer. Just kidding.
Greg, a quick follow-up question for you. And we're going to take this next set of questions pretty quickly. So Geraldine Conrad asked right at the start of our conversation, is there any access to public transit? I know from personal experience, Austin has never prioritized that. And I know that there is access to public transit, but Greg, can you talk a little bit about transit and how that plays into Miller? We heard a little from Bill and from America on this, but I'd love to just, if there's just a couple of things on providing transit options as part of the vision at Miller.
Yeah, so Transit's been part of the master plan back in the 90s, and as the person who made the comment, Austin has not passed for many years a robust transit bond until last year. But the bond, the master plan always had transit as a major part of it. But because of the lack of kind of community support for transit, we have a bus system, call it a it's Capital Metro, who's our bus system. So we've always had that through the community, and that expands as the community grows. But as a part of this bond, we're actually getting bus rapid transit that's going to go right through the community downtown and actually go to the airport. There'll actually be two lines that go through it. So I'd say we're there. It's not open yet. A $7 billion bond was passed last year by the community. So, it's the first time I'd say that Austin communities embraced transit, and now it's about execution and build out. And we'll have 2 BRT lines that will go to 2 different locations and go through Miller.
Yeah. And BRTS systems are absolutely fantastic, for many, many reasons. The first being, of course, that they use existing road infrastructure. So anyway, fantastic. That's fantastic news. Thanks so much, Greg. Donald Hunsiker asks, America, what was the most difficult challenge you had to overcome in the building design? Pick one.
So for this project, I have to give a shout out to Studio D. They were actually the sustainability consultant that managed the certification for our project. And it's a pretty tall order to meet 5-star AAGB, LEED, Platinum, and WELL Pilot version 2 Silver. So one of the challenges for this project, as Mark was saying, they wanted to do everything. And so we really had to rely on the calculations to see what was the best path to go, because we did have cost and a budget to meet and time. And so I think for this project, we were lucky that we had a client that really wanted to put everything into it. They were already moving into a great neighborhood that could get them half part of the way. I know a lot of credit is due to Miller, but I also want to say that there's credit due to the owner, to Austin Energy, because site will get you part of the way, and it's really the building and the client that gets you the rest of the way there. So it was a balance between those rating systems and trying to understand which one would benefit Austin Energy the best, keeping their employees in mind and what their goals were. I think it was sort of a dream job for us to kind of move in the sustainability efforts forward.
That's fantastic. Donald has another question. Would the panel discuss if a systems commissioning process was employed or will be employed to confirm energy or sustainability design goals are being met?
Yes, absolutely. So building commissioning is nearing completion. And throughout the process, we had a robust envelope commissioning process. We engaged engineered exteriors who really not only closely oversaw the development of envelope detailing, but then throughout construction did a fantastic set of construction observation reports looking at air barrier installation and any moisture infiltration opportunities. Worked very closely with the general contractor to make sure all of that detailing was being properly installed, and literally, up on the lift, looking at window installations, and looking at all the tiny little air barrier punctures that are so it's so easy to make, and once they're covered up, no one ever sees them, right? So that was a very robust effort, and yeah, then of course we're doing the enhanced commissioning per LEED requirements. So we're expecting the building's BAS system to be pushing out some good data for us to do some post-occupancy analysis to understand how the building is performing over time. And that's not, again, this is something Austin Energy was pushing, hey, we need these numbers. We need a system that's going to give us these numbers so we know we're performing.
Randy Davis asked, were there discussions about how the use of the building may change over time? Obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but how do you keep the program sort of flexible enough that the building can stay relevant over 70, 100 years or whatever that outlook might be?
Hey, I'll mention, and America mentioned it earlier, when Austin Energy came out, they said, we want 270,000 square feet, expandable to 350,000 square feet at some certain time. And that's, from a developer standpoint, that's hard, right? Do you reserve land? Do you keep, or do you try to add a floor on? And America mentioned it, this idea of reusing the parking structure and this unique concept and lining up the top floor with the not quite the top floor of the parking structure, or it was the top floor of the parking structure. So lining it up to expand the parking structure. And so we've been looking at a lot of different, and not just this building, but buildings to reuse parking structures. And this is the first time we can honestly say that it was designed in a way that truly, from a structural standpoint and trying to look at an MEP standpoint to say, hey, this is truly expandable, that you can expand the building. So it's not the direct question probably of the, of the building itself, but I think that, America, mentioned it. It is something that I think people talk about a lot. And for us, at least as a developer, it's the first time we really executed on something to reuse the parking structure down the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would add, I think we, internally looked at the work we perform. And so what we're finding out is, like any other industry, we're leveraging technology. And so we really thought about, do we really need a data room? Because everyone's going software as a service, right? So we built a building without a data room. It's all going off-site, where software as a service is the future. We knew that 5G was coming along, so we said, make the building ready for 5G. We're going to have mobile devices everywhere. We've gone wireless. We want completely Cisco in the whole building. Not that I'm selling Cisco products, but just by having that integration of the single provider allows us, whether the idea was to be plug and play. It didn't matter which conference room you walked into, you knew how to operate the equipment. We have indoor, outdoor. But I think that the biggest advantage is kudos to whoever designed the floor plates. They're large floor plates, obviously, because of the size of the building. But it feels like you're in different sections of the building where you walk. And so we can still take the advantage of having those large floor plates to reconfigure employees and workspaces, but you really get the sense that you're in a much smaller, more intimate work area when you're in the building.
And I'll brag on America and her team. The interiors team, led by Paige, used the exterior expressions. You remember maybe those orange boxes that were expressed at the exterior, create these sort of columns of space through the floor plate that really create different neighborhoods within the floor plate. And so those, we were calling them, well, I think social portals is what we landed on, America, correct me if I'm wrong. And those are places where people come together for shared amenities at each floor plate. So conference rooms, huddle rooms, break rooms, soft seating areas. And those really are the interfaces between different interior spatial configurations. So I'm glad that that's feeling successful, Mark. That's awesome.
And the building is one of those places, every time you walk around a corner, you're surprised by what you find. So I don't think it's something that's going to age, right? So we've all been to the standard Class A type office space. This really is not that. So I don't think people will get tired. In fact, we talked about how do we get people to come back in the office once we get the all clear. And I think once people show up here, they'll want to spend time here. We do think we'll have more employees teleworking as an option, and we encourage that. That encourages less trips. But we think this is the place that people will want to come and take advantage of. So it's a delight to be inside the building.
Yeah, that's great. Thinking about how the building's capacity expands, as Greg said, in America, you did point that out earlier as well. But also in terms of how the program can evolve and change over time, and how it feels fresh. And that's actually a huge factor in sustainability as well. The more we can extend the life of the materials we're putting in, again, the more we're helping that embodied carbon footprint over time. So there's many advantages to kind of building with a light fit. one last question from our audience, and then I have a final question for all of you before we close out today. Donald Hunsaker again asks, can you discuss how your mechanical engineer and your other consultants participated during the SD in the energy modeling and in early building design planning? Bill and America, you touched on this a little bit already, but is there anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll pick that up. So Page is a architecture and engineering firm, and we had the advantage on this project of Page Mechanical being the lead mechanical designer for Austin Energy. And it made it very easy for us to go down the hallway and pester them to come to meetings. And you know, they were, and I'm joking obviously, but they were involved integrally from the earliest phase of design. As America mentioned earlier, being good stewards of you know, the city of Austin's budget for this project, we had to understand those major systems cost inputs very early in the project, and this was a GMP-driven project delivery. So actually, they were very closely involved to make sure the schematic design was going to track very closely to the projected cost of the system. And we landed on that chilled beam. We looked at 100% chilled beam design because of Austin's climate and the amount of full height glazing that we had. We deemed it just a little risky to go 100% chilled beam because of the risk of condensation you might get at certain perimeter conditions. But anyway, that's geeking out a little bit. It's just that, yes, they were involved, and we settled on a design with them very early in SD, or overall design approach, I should say.
Thanks so much, Bill. Before I get to my last question for all of you, again, a quick thank you to Paige for bringing us all together today. And also a quick thank you to our sponsors, CertainTeed, DuPont, Tedlar, Grohe, Kimball, Mannington Commercial, and Verstio for supporting today's event. And thanks to all of you for attending. One last question to all our panelists. Obviously, this is it's a bit of a milestone project, you know, and I just love to hear, as you reflect back on the process, you know, are there any key lessons learned that you're carrying forward into future work, whether it is, you know, about the client designer relationship, whether it's about, you know, the consultants, whether it's about Miller and how to leverage the neighborhood, whether it's about community engagement. I just love to hear, you know, maybe one or two things that that are going to stay with you from this project. Mark, of course, you're going to be in the building. I understand that, but you know, just from the process itself, things that kind of stick with you.
Yeah. So first, you don't build a corporate office too many times in your lifetime, so this will be the one and only time I do it. And I get a little bit of background. I'm a certified energy manager and demand side manager, so I get how buildings are being used energy-wise. But the thing is, don't be afraid of LEED Platinum. I just saw nothing but dollar signs and pain, and as I got more into it, I realized this is the only way to go. In fact, we're about to build a new corporate warehouse, and my first statement is, how do we make this LEED Platinum? And so as we go into that next building, we're taking the lessons learned here and taking it in Austin. And if anyone's in the area, we encourage you to stop by and visit us and see the advantages of our building. And hopefully we can get someone else to take that step to go LEED Platinum the next time.
That's wonderful.
Avi, I'll jump in and mention a little bit about that client architect relationship. And I'm sure it's an experience a lot of architects have had of receiving a program that seems completely pat and ready to build from. And that was somewhat the case in this project, except that we had such a great partner in Austin Energy that we got to very early in design step back a little bit and say, okay, we have a program that gives us a bunch of spaces and a bunch of functions, but the building is about higher goals than that. And so we had the opportunity to establish a really strong working relationship that I think carried all the way through the construction process of understanding at a higher level what those goals are. And one lesson I'm going to take from this is how to facilitate those relationships in future projects. Because confession, I think I've in past projects sometimes taken that program and said, okay, let's just design a building. And actually the experience with Austin Energy taught me that would deepen that relationship early in the process, find out what the real the deeper goals are, and it can be much more rewarding for everyone.
So I'll go next. I would say lessons learned: do not build during a global pandemic and/or a snowstorm in the state of Texas. First and foremost, if we can prevent that next time. And there are a lot of stories about that on this project, that construction shutdowns and power outages, which we didn't have thanks to Austin Energy. But no, all seriousness, I think this was a full turnkey deal for us as the developer, all the way to the FF&E, to the commissioning, to putting it all together. And and I don't know if this is so much a lesson learned, but I think getting the right team, which our team with Paige and others, we had the right all the way down from the architects, the engineers, the contractor that we brought on board right away, having that right team where it can be done together to deliver a turnkey project. And I joke about the pandemic and the snowstorm. And 2 years ago, we picked a date of closing on August 4th, and we closed on August 7th. And that doesn't happen with all these different issues and everything out there without the right team in place. And so it's probably we try to do it all the time, but I think on this one, we had a unique situation, very unique environment, and we had the right client, we had the right consultants and everyone else to bring this in actually below budget. And we were 3 days late on schedule. And I'd say it took a team effort of everybody like holding hands and joining together to make it happen.
It was April, and the reason why we were 3 days late was because of the lawyers. So
yeah, right. Right. Mark, I couldn't agree more. If it was us, we would have been early.
Yeah. Okay.
So Greg kind of spoke about what I was going to talk about, and that's just getting a team together early is better. I think you can't create a building like this and reach all those goals if you're picking your commissioning agent at the end of CD or thinking about the final decisions on equipment at the end of DD. So it really took getting the team on board together with the partnership with the Catalyst and Austin Energy and outlining all the goals. And if we were missing someone in the team, we needed to go get them. So we pulled in the right consultants, the right experts to really guide us and reach our goals. So this is something I tell all my projects. It never happens, but now there's proof that when it does, it really works. And if you have clients who are hesitant to execute a contract with a consultant, just encourage them that they're going to get their goals and it's going to be a lot smoother and meet all their budget and schedule if we can just pull everybody together as early as possible. And having the contractor on board and running those cost analysis for us for materials, it's so valuable because you could make real-time decisions while you're designing and not wait till the end and find some a little bit people that are upset because there's some surprise costs involved.
Yeah. Well, that's as fine a set of lessons as I can think of. Aim high, lead platinum. Hold the program close, but dig a little deeper, and build a great team and do it early. I think that's a formula for success if I ever heard one. So thank you so much, everyone, for your insights today, and thanks to everyone who joined us for today's discussion. It's been great to have you on. I just want to say, projects like Austin Energy headquarters are the type of projects that Metropolis wants to celebrate this year and every year. If you know Metropolis, you know that sustainability is very close to our heart, and we're deeply embedded in advocating for better practices in our industry. This year, we've launched an awards program called the Planet Positive Awards. We are looking for great projects from across the country, across building types, to enter our awards program. You'll see the link in the chat right now, but also you can visit metropolismac.com at any point in time, and it's fairly easy for you to look into the awards program. I encourage you to enter. We're looking for projects at all scales of all types with different levels of achievement. So please go ahead, take a look at it. We really want to celebrate sustainable design excellence in all its forms and shapes and colors available to us today. We're in the middle of an amazing movement. We can't lose this momentum as we hurtle towards 2030. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our panelists, not just for the amazing insights today, but also for the extremely important work that you do in ensuring a positive future for all of us on this planet. Because that and no less is what all of you are working on day in and day out. So thank you so much for doing that for us. We really, really appreciate it. And one last time, thank you to our attendees as well as to our sponsors for making today's discussion possible. That's Certainty, DuPont Tedlar, Grohe, Kimball, Mannington Commercial, and Versteel. And a huge thank you to Paige, of course, for hosting today's discussion. It's been a real pleasure talking through this amazing project and this amazing site with all of you. I really appreciate it, and I hope all of you have a great evening. Thank you.